Clara sat quietly in the back of the rickety carriage, staring out at the endless fields of golden grass that stretched as far as her eyes could see. The sun was just rising, casting long, soft shadows across the ground, and the wind carried the faint smell of earth and morning dew. Her heart beat fast, a mixture of excitement and fear filling her chest. She had left everything familiar behind, her small hometown, her parents' warm kitchen, and the few friends she had grown up with, to come here, to a place she had only seen in letters and imagined in her dreams. She had agreed to become a mail-order bride for a man she had never met in person. The letters were full of promises: a large ranch, steady work, and a kind, strong husband who would care for her. But now, seeing the endless fields and the distant solitary house on a hill, she wondered if she had made the right choice. The carriage creaked as it bounced along the dirt path. Clara's hands were folded tightly in her lap, and she could feel the tension in her small shoulders. She had prepared for the journey, packed a few belongings in a small trunk, and dressed neatly, yet she still felt unprepared for what awaited her. The townspeople she had passed along the way had stared at her carriage curiously, whispering to one another. She could hear bits of their words carried by the wind: new bride, mail order, tiny girl. Their eyes lingered on her small frame, her gentle movements and her pale face, as if they were trying to decide if she would survive the harsh life of the ranch. Clara wished she could disappear into the tall grass, hide from their judging eyes, but she knew there was no turning back now. At the top of the hill, the house loomed larger. It was made of rough timber, with a wide porch and a stone chimney that puffed smoke into the sky. Around it, the land spread out in fields, fenced pastures, and scattered barns. Clara's chest tightened at the sight. The house looked so big, so empty, and she imagined the man who lived here, strong, quiet, and used to being alone. She wondered what he would think of her, this tiny girl with soft hands and a nervous smile. Would he be kind, or would he be disappointed in her? The carriage rattled to a stop in front of the house, and Clara took a deep breath. She could hear the crunch of her shoes on the gravel as she stepped down, clutching the small trunk tightly. The door of the house opened slowly, and there he was. Jeb, the man she had been writing to for months, stood tall and broad in the doorway. His boots were worn, his hands rough, and his eyes were a sharp gray that seemed to look right through her. He was older than she had imagined, but not old, just weathered, a man shaped by years of work in the sun, wind, and dust. His expression was unreadable, but his presence made her small heart beat even faster. He looked her over, from her carefully dressed hair to her tiny shoes, and Clara felt a shiver run down her spine. Then he spoke, his voice low and firm, carrying across the yard. "Can the little one endure it?" The words were like a sudden chill, and Clara blinked, unsure what to say. She had expected kindness, maybe a smile, or at least a welcoming word. Instead, she felt the weight of those words pressing down on her. Could she endure what life here would demand? She didn't know. She wanted to nod, to say yes, but her voice caught in her throat. Jeb stepped aside, letting her enter the house first. She lifted her trunk and carried it through the doorway, noticing how cool the inside felt compared to the bright sunlight outside. The house smelled of wood smoke, hay, and something faintly sweet like sugar or syrup. She set the trunk down carefully and looked around. The rooms were simple but solid. There was a large kitchen with pots hanging above the stove, a living area with rough wooden furniture, and a staircase leading to the bedrooms above. Clara felt a mix of awe and nervousness. Everything was bigger than her old home, more open and bare, and the quiet made her feel exposed. Jeb followed her silently, his boots thudding against the wooden floor. He didn't offer help with the trunk, and Clara felt a twinge of irritation. He was testing her, she realized, seeing if she could manage on her own. Perhaps this was what he meant by asking if she could endure it. She swallowed hard, trying to steady herself. She had to prove she was capable, that she could handle the life she had chosen or had been sent to without complaint. After a moment, Jeb spoke again. "The work here is not for someone faint of heart. You will rise early, help with the animals, cook, clean, and learn to ride. There is no room for weakness. Do you understand?" His eyes were fixed on her, piercing yet not unkind. Clara nodded, her throat tight, and forced a small smile. "Yes, sir. I understand." The words sounded braver than she felt, even to her own ears. He stepped back, motioning toward the kitchen. "Then let us start. You will eat first. Work comes after." Clara followed him, feeling a mixture of relief and anxiety. The kitchen was large, with a wooden table in the center and shelves lined with jars, dishes, and dried herbs. The smell of coffee and fresh bread greeted her, and her stomach gave a small, hopeful flutter. She realized that, despite her fear, she was hungry for this new life, hungry to prove herself. Jeb prepared a simple meal, and Clara watched, noting his efficient movements. He was methodical, precise, and clearly used to taking care of himself. She felt a pang of doubt. Would he have time or patience for her mistakes? Would he allow her to learn at her own pace, or would every misstep be met with disappointment? She reminded herself that she had survived challenges before, small though they had been, and perhaps she could survive this too. After eating, Jeb handed her a small broom. "Clean the porch," he said. Clara nodded and stepped outside. The wind was stronger now, rustling the tall grass, and she swept with care, noticing how the sun warmed her back. She worked diligently, trying to quiet the thoughts that swirled in her mind. Every sweep of the broom, every collected leaf was a small victory. She imagined Jeb watching from the doorway, judging her effort, and felt a spark of determination. She would not fail, not here, not in this vast, unfamiliar place. By evening, Clara was exhausted. Her small hands ached, her feet were sore, but she had managed the chores as best as she could. Jeb stood nearby, observing without comment, and she realized he was testing her in silence. The first day was over, and she had survived. She dared a small, hopeful thought. Perhaps she could endure this life after all. As she climbed the narrow staircase to the bedroom upstairs, she paused to look out the window. The sun had dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The fields below were calm, the animals settling in for the night, and a quiet sense of possibility touched her heart. She had arrived as a tiny, uncertain girl, and now, though still small and inexperienced, she had taken the first steps toward a life she had chosen. She entered the simple bedroom, placed her trunk against the wall, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her body was tired, her mind racing, but for the first time she felt a flicker of pride. She had survived the journey, met the man who would be her husband, and faced the first day on the ranch. She closed her eyes, imagining what the days ahead might hold. Hardship certainly, but also growth, perhaps even love. The wind whispered outside, and she felt a strange comfort in its sound, as if the land itself was acknowledging her arrival. Jeb knocked on the door softly. "Rest now. Tomorrow work begins in earnest." His tone was firm but not cruel. Clara nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. She had endured the day, and somehow she felt that she could endure more. The night stretched before her, quiet and deep, carrying both fear and hope. She lay down, feeling the soft covers against her skin, and whispered a silent promise to herself. She would endure, no matter how small or fragile she seemed, and she would meet this life with courage. Outside, the wind moved through the tall grass, carrying the scent of the ranch, the animals, and the earth. Clara's journey had begun, and the first chapter of her new life was written in quiet determination, hope, and the faint, thrilling fear of the unknown. The next morning, Clara woke before the sun had fully risen. The room was still cool, and the quiet of the ranch pressed around her like a gentle weight. She stretched her tired muscles and took a deep breath, trying to steel herself for what lay ahead. Yesterday had been just a taste of ranch life, but today promised more. She could hear the soft lowing of cows from the fields and the distant clatter of Jeb moving about outside. Her heart thumped with a mixture of nervousness and resolve. She dressed simply, choosing a long, practical dress and sturdy shoes. Her small frame made her feel vulnerable against the vastness of the ranch, but she reminded herself that she had made this choice, and now she had to meet it with courage. She brushed her hair quickly and tied it back, then went downstairs to find Jeb already at the kitchen table, sipping coffee from a chipped mug. He looked up as she entered, his eyes sharp but not unkind. "Breakfast is ready. Eat quickly. The animals need tending," he said. His words were brisk, but Clara caught a hint of routine kindness in them, a rhythm of life she would have to follow. The meal was simple, bread, eggs, and fresh milk, but nourishing. Clara ate quickly, mindful of Jeb's quiet gaze. He did not speak much, only giving small directions about which chores to begin with. Today she was to help feed the chickens, check the water troughs for the horses, and prepare the barn for the day's work. She nodded, trying to memorize his instructions. She had never done such work before, and the thought of failing made her stomach tighten. Outside, the wind was brisk, carrying the smell of hay and earth. Clara followed Jeb to the barn, watching his confident movements. He handled the animals with care but with firm authority, his hands rough from years of labor. Clara tried to mirror him, feeding the chickens and pouring water for the horses, but her hands were small and unpracticed. A chicken pecked at her fingers and she yelped softly, startling herself. Jeb glanced at her and then at the bird but made no comment. Clara realized he expected her to learn through action, to endure mistakes without complaint. By mid-morning, her small arms ached and her legs felt shaky. She had carried water buckets, swept the barn, and mended a broken fence under Jeb's watchful eyes. Her movements were slow, deliberate, but often clumsy. Several times she dropped tools or spilled water, and each time she braced for a sharp word. Jeb would frown but rarely scold, instead showing her how to do the task correctly. Clara felt a mix of relief and frustration. She wanted his approval, yet the work felt endless and she feared she might not be strong enough. The hours passed in a steady rhythm of labor. Clara discovered small joys along the way. A horse nuzzling her shoulder, the soft clucking of hens, and the warm sun on her back. She found herself laughing quietly when a rooster strutted comically, and for a moment the fear that had gripped her since arrival softened. Jeb noticed her smile and said nothing, but she thought she saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. It was subtle, but enough to give her a small spark of hope. By midday she was covered in sweat and dirt, her dress sticking to her skin. Jeb led her to the creek behind the barn, where she could wash her hands and face. The water was cold, shocking her tired muscles awake but refreshing. Clara knelt by the creek, splashing her face and feeling a moment of relief. She realized that despite the hard work she was learning, adapting. Every ache in her body was a lesson, every mistake an opportunity to grow. She thought again of his words. Can the little one endure it? Perhaps he meant to test not only her physical strength but her determination, her spirit. Returning to the barn, Clara found Jeb waiting with the tools she would need to repair a broken fence. He handed her the hammer and nails with care, demonstrating how to secure the boards. Clara watched closely, then tried to replicate his movements. Her first attempts were clumsy. A board slipped, a nail bent. She groaned softly in frustration, feeling tears prick her eyes. Jeb walked over and adjusted her hands, showing her a better grip. You have to be steady, patient. It takes time, he said. His tone was firm, but the words carried no harshness, only instruction. Clara nodded, determined to succeed. Hours later, the fence stood repaired, imperfect but solid. Clara stepped back and wiped her brow, a small smile forming on her tired face. Jeb studied her work, then nodded once, a rare gesture of acknowledgement. Not bad, he said simply. Clara's chest swelled with pride. She had endured the morning, learned something new, and even earned a small recognition from the man whose approval she craved. The ranch felt slightly less intimidating now, and she realized that endurance was not just about surviving, it was about learning, improving, and keeping faith in herself. As the sun climbed higher, Clara moved to the kitchen to prepare lunch. Jeb collected eggs from the chickens and milked the cow while she worked, their actions forming a quiet, efficient rhythm. The meal was simple but hearty, and when it was finished, they ate together in silence. Clara noticed Jeb's eyes softened slightly, the edges of his mouth relaxing. She dared a small smile, and he returned it briefly before looking away. She sensed that he was beginning to see her not as a fragile little girl but as someone who could adapt and contribute. After lunch, Jeb assigned her to gather firewood and check the water supply for the animals. Clara lifted the heavy logs with effort, feeling her muscles ache but her spirit strengthen. Each task she completed built her confidence, each small success proving she could endure the work. She thought of her family back home, of the life she had left behind, and of the letters that had promised safety and care. This life was harder than she had imagined, but it was also real, tangible, and filled with the possibility of growth and connection. By late afternoon, Clara was exhausted, her hands blistered, and her dress stained with dirt. She paused on the porch, looking out over the fields, breathing deeply. The wind ruffled her hair, and she felt a strange pride swell inside her. She had survived the day, faced the harshness of ranch work, and had not given up. Jeb joined her, handing her a mug of cool water. He did not offer praise, only a quiet, steady presence. Clara realized that endurance was not about constant admiration or kindness. It was about perseverance, about continuing even when recognition was sparse. As evening approached, the chores wound down. The animals were fed, the barn was tidy, and the fences were secure. Clara's body ached, but there was a satisfaction in the completeness of her work. She had proven to herself that she could endure physical labor, adapt to new challenges, and meet Jeb's expectations. He watched her silently, occasionally offering a nod or instruction, his judgment no longer sharp but tempered with acknowledgement. Clara sensed a shift in him, a recognition that she was capable, resilient, and willing to learn. The sun set slowly behind the distant hills, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and purple. Clara stood on the porch, the cool evening air brushing against her skin. She thought about the morning, the hours of hard work, and the small victories that had filled the day. She realized that the ranch, though harsh and demanding, was teaching her strength she had not known she possessed. She thought again of Jeb's words, "Can the little one endure it?" She no longer felt the chill of fear those words had brought. Instead, they reminded her of her own courage, of her ability to face hardship and keep moving forward. As night fell, the house was quiet except for the soft crackle of the fireplace. Clara prepared for bed, careful with her small, tired movements, and reflected on the day. She had faced the demands of ranch life, learned new skills, and discovered an inner strength. Though she was still small and inexperienced, she was growing, adapting, and proving to herself, and perhaps to Jeb, that she could endure much more than she had imagined. She lay down, listening to the distant calls of animals settling in for the night, and felt a calm sense of accomplishment. Clara realized that endurance was not just about surviving the ranch. It was about learning, growing, and facing the unknown with determination. She thought of the days ahead, of the work, the challenges, and the possibility of connection with Jeb. Despite the fatigue, she felt a spark of hope. She had survived the second day, learned more about herself, and taken another step toward becoming part of this new life. As sleep slowly took her, she whispered to herself a quiet promise. She would endure, she would learn, and she would face whatever the ranch and Jeb demanded with courage. Outside, the wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the scent of earth, hay, and distant animals. The ranch was quiet now, yet full of life. Clara's journey was just beginning, and though the days ahead would be challenging, she knew she had the strength to meet them. She closed her eyes, letting the exhaustion carry her into dreams, dreaming of resilience, growth, and the promise of endurance. The third morning at the ranch came with a golden sunrise that spilled across the fields like a promise. Clara woke slowly, her muscles still sore from the day before, but her heart felt lighter. She had survived 2 days of hard labor, and a quiet sense of accomplishment had begun to grow within her. She dressed quickly, pulling on her sturdy shoes and simple dress, and tied her hair back in a neat braid. Today she felt a small spark of confidence. She knew the work would be demanding, but she also knew she could meet it. In the kitchen, Jeb was already at the table, his weathered hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. He glanced up at Clara as she entered and gave a brief nod. His eyes, sharp and observant, softened slightly as he watched her. "Morning. Eat quickly. The day will be long," he said, his voice steady but not unkind. Clara nodded and poured herself some milk into a cup. She ate quickly, mindful of his gaze but feeling less nervous than the first 2 days. The kitchen smelled of bread and cooked eggs, a comfort amidst the uncertainty of ranch life. After breakfast, Jeb handed her a small basket. "Collect eggs from the hens," he instructed, pointing toward the chicken coop. Clara walked to the coop, her small hands brushing against the warm wooden boards. The hens clucked softly as she entered, and she felt a surprising sense of joy in gathering the eggs. Each one she placed carefully in the basket was a small victory, a sign that she could manage the responsibilities Jeb expected of her. As she worked, she noticed Jeb watching quietly from a distance, his expression unreadable but attentive. By mid-morning, Clara had completed the egg gathering and moved on to other chores. She carried water to the horses, swept the barn, and organized the feed. Each task tested her endurance and patience, but she found herself adapting more quickly than before. She was learning the rhythm of ranch life, the movements, the sounds, the small details that made the work manageable. She began to feel a quiet pride in her accomplishments, a sense that she was proving not only to Jeb but also to herself that she could endure the demands of this life. Jeb approached her as she was stacking firewood. "Your hands are small but steady." "That is good," he said, his voice low and approving. Clara felt a warm flush at his words. Praise had been rare, but she knew it was sincere. She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and continued her work. Each log she lifted, each task she completed, felt like a step toward earning his respect. She realized that endurance was not just about physical strength. It was about determination, patience, and the quiet resolve to keep moving forward even when the work was hard. Around noon, a small crisis arose. One of the fences had been damaged and a few of the cows were wandering too close to the forest. Jeb's eyes narrowed as he assessed the situation. "We need to fix this quickly," he said. Clara followed him to the fence, her heart pounding. She felt nervous, knowing that mistakes here could have serious consequences. Jeb handed her tools and boards, showing her exactly how to secure the fence. Clara listened carefully, mimicking his movements. The first few attempts were shaky. A board slipped, a nail bent, and she nearly dropped the hammer. But Jeb remained patient, guiding her hands, correcting her gently. By the time they finished, the fence stood firm and the cows were safely inside. Clara's heart soared with pride. She had faced a real challenge, worked through fear and clumsiness, and succeeded. As the day progressed, Clara began to notice small shifts in Jeb's behavior. He spoke to her with more patience, offered guidance rather than commands, and occasionally paused to acknowledge her efforts. There were moments when he smiled briefly, a flash of warmth that made her heart beat faster. She realized that he was beginning to see her not as a fragile little bride, but as a capable partner in the work of the ranch. The thought encouraged her, giving her a sense of purpose and determination. In the afternoon, Jeb assigned her a task she had not tried before: milking the cows. Clara approached the task with caution, her small hands trembling slightly. She watched Jeb's movements closely, imitating his rhythm and technique. The first attempts were messy, milk splashing onto her hands and clothes, but she persisted. Jeb guided her, his hands steadying hers when necessary. After several tries, she managed to milk a full pail successfully. A quiet sense of triumph filled her. She realized that endurance was about perseverance, about trying again even when the task seemed impossible, and about trusting herself to improve with practice. By late afternoon, the sun had moved low in the sky, casting long shadows across the fields. Clara felt exhausted but satisfied. Her small hands were calloused, her muscles ached, but she had accomplished more than she had imagined possible. She paused on the porch, looking out over the vast fields, the barns, and the animals she had cared for. The ranch, once intimidating and overwhelming, now felt slightly familiar. She realized that each day of work was shaping her into a stronger, more capable version of herself. Jeb approached, carrying 2 mugs of water. He handed one to Clara without a word, and she took it with a grateful nod. They sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The air was cool, and the quiet of the evening was broken only by the distant sounds of animals settling for the night. Clara felt a small but growing connection to Jeb, sensing that he was beginning to respect her not only for her endurance, but also for her spirit and determination. As night fell, Clara prepared for bed, her body weary but her mind buzzing with the events of the day. She thought about the challenges she had faced, the mistakes she had made, and the small successes she had earned. She realized that endurance was not about avoiding failure. It was about learning from mistakes, pushing through fear, and continuing to grow. The ranch had tested her in ways she had never expected, but each test had also shown her her own strength. Before sleep, Clara reflected on her relationship with Jeb. He was stern and commanding. Yes, but he was also patient and observant. She began to understand that his initial words, "Can the little one endure it?" were not meant to scare her but to challenge her, to see if she could rise to the demands of this life. She felt a quiet determination stir within her. She would endure, she would learn, and she would meet each day with courage and effort. The night was peaceful, the stars bright above the ranch. Clara lay in bed, listening to the soft sounds of the animals and the wind moving through the fields. She felt a sense of accomplishment and hope. She had faced the demands of the ranch, learned new skills, and begun to earn Jeb's respect. She had discovered strength she had not known she possessed, and she understood that endurance was both physical and emotional. Clara drifted to sleep with a quiet sense of pride. She knew that the days ahead would be challenging, but she also knew that she was capable of meeting those challenges. The ranch, the work, and the man who had once questioned her endurance were all part of a journey that was shaping her into someone stronger and more confident. She closed her eyes, ready to face whatever the next day might bring, secure in the knowledge that she had survived not only the physical demands of the ranch, but also the tests of her spirit. By morning, Clara would wake ready for another day of work, another opportunity to prove herself, and another chance to build a connection with Jeb. The ranch was hard, the work relentless, but Clara had begun to find her place. She was small, yes, but she was growing stronger with each task, each challenge, and each moment of quiet determination. She had endured the first weeks, and now she felt ready for whatever the future might hold. The morning air was crisp, and a soft fog clung to the fields as Clara awoke. Her body was sore from the previous day's work, but her determination had only grown stronger. Today, Jeb had a more serious tone in his letters of instruction. There was a storm predicted in the afternoon, and he wanted everything prepared. Fences repaired, animals safely secured, and supplies organized in case of flooding. Clara felt a nervous flutter in her chest. She had faced the demands of ranch life before, but this felt different. It was not just about learning chores. It was about endurance under pressure, about rising to the challenge when the stakes were higher. She dressed quickly, pulling on her boots and tying her braid firmly behind her head. Breakfast was quiet as usual, but today Jeb's eyes held a sharp intensity. He gave instructions in short bursts, each word precise, as if measuring her ability to respond quickly and effectively. Clara nodded, committing everything to memory. She had learned that listening closely and acting without hesitation could make all the difference on the ranch. She felt a surge of resolve. She would meet the challenge head-on, no matter how daunting it seemed. Their first task was to inspect the fences that surrounded the pasture. Clara walked beside Jeb, observing his practiced movements and listening carefully to his directions. Several boards were loose, and one section had already begun to sag. Clara handed him tools and held nails as he worked, her small hands steady despite her nerves. She followed his instructions carefully, hammering boards into place and reinforcing weak spots. For the first time, she noticed the rhythm of their teamwork, silent, efficient, almost unspoken. She felt a quiet sense of pride as they finished repairing the first section, and Jeb's subtle nod of approval warmed her more than any words could. Next, they turned their attention to the animals. The cows and horses were restless, sensing the approaching storm. Clara helped guide them into the barns, soothing them with gentle words and careful movements. A young calf struggled to keep up, and she knelt, lifting it gently and encouraging it forward. Jeb watched, his stern expression softening. Clara realized that endurance was not only about strength but also about patience, empathy, and the ability to stay calm under pressure. Each small act of care mattered, and she felt a deepening connection to the life she had chosen. By mid-morning, the storm clouds were gathering, dark and heavy, blotting out the sun. Clara and Jeb worked side by side to secure the barn doors, tie down loose equipment, and move supplies to higher ground. The wind picked up and raindrops began to fall, cold and relentless. Clara's dress clung to her, her hair damp, and her hands were raw from the constant labor. Yet she continued without complaint. She realized that this was the true test Jeb had spoken of, the challenge of enduring not just the routine work, but the unpredictable hardships that could strike at any moment. A sudden gust of wind blew through the fields, scattering hay and small tools. Clara ran to catch a loose bucket, slipping on the wet ground and nearly falling. Jeb's strong hand steadied her, and he muttered, "Careful, the storm is no place for mistakes." Clara nodded, a flicker of fear running through her chest, but she kept moving. She refused to let the storm intimidate her. She had endured the daily tasks of the ranch, learned new skills, and faced her own fears. This storm was just another challenge, and she would meet it with the same courage she had summoned in every other task. Hours passed in a blur of effort and determination. Clara's muscles ached, her clothes were soaked through, and the rain continued to fall. Yet she felt a strange exhilaration, a sense of purpose that made the exhaustion bearable. Jeb worked beside her without complaint, guiding her when necessary but allowing her to take initiative. At one point, a tree branch cracked under the wind, falling dangerously close to the barn. Clara reacted instantly. pulling the animals out of harm's way and signaling Jeb. His eyes widened slightly in surprise and approval. She realized that endurance was not just about following orders. It was about thinking quickly, acting decisively, and protecting what mattered most. As the storm reached its peak, Clara found herself drenched and exhausted, but also proud. She had survived the harshest conditions yet, had worked tirelessly alongside Jeb, and had demonstrated her courage and capability. The storm, which had once seemed terrifying, now felt like a challenge she had mastered. She began to understand that endurance was not merely about surviving. It was about rising above fear, adapting to circumstances, and proving one's inner strength. When the rain finally began to taper off, Clara and Jeb surveyed the ranch. The fences held, the animals were safe, and the barns had weathered the storm. Clara's chest heaved with exertion, but she felt a deep sense of accomplishment. She had endured the most demanding day yet, and Jeb's expression, though still serious, held a hint of pride. For the first time, she sensed that he truly believed in her ability to thrive on the ranch, not just survive. Later, as they moved into the kitchen to warm up and dry off, Jeb handed Clara a towel and said simply, "You did well today." The words were few but significant, carrying the weight of acknowledgement she had been seeking. Clara felt a warm flush of pride and relief. She realized that endurance was not only about physical strength, but also about patience, persistence, and earning the trust and respect of others. Jeb's quiet approval meant more than any praise she had received in her life. After a simple meal of stew and bread, Clara and Jeb sat on the porch, watching the storm clouds retreat and the sun break through in patches. The ranch smelled of wet earth, hay, and the faint warmth of animals settling back into their pens. Clara felt a deep sense of connection, not just to the land and the work, but to Jeb himself. She realized that endurance was also about forming bonds, learning to rely on others, and trusting in their guidance and support. The storm had tested her physically and emotionally, but it had also brought them closer together. As evening fell, Clara prepared for bed, exhausted but content. She thought about the day, the storm, and the tasks she had completed. Each challenge she had faced had taught her something new about herself, her strength, her resilience, and her ability to endure more than she had imagined. She realized that Jeb's initial words, "Can the little one endure it?" were not meant to intimidate her, but to inspire her, to challenge her to rise to the occasion. She had met that challenge and in doing so had begun to earn his respect and trust. Before sleep, Clara reflected on her growth. She had learned to care for the animals, repair fences, adapt to sudden challenges, and work tirelessly despite exhaustion. She had endured the storm and discovered that her small size did not limit her strength or courage. She understood that endurance was not about avoiding hardship, but about facing it head-on, learning from it, and emerging stronger on the other side. The ranch, once overwhelming, now felt like a place where she could prove herself and grow into the person she wanted to be. Jeb knocked softly on the door. "Rest, tomorrow will bring new work," he said. His voice was firm but not harsh, and Clara sensed a quiet respect in his tone. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. She had endured the storm, met the challenges of the day, and begun to earn the man's approval she had hoped for. She felt a quiet pride, knowing that each day of work, each act of endurance, was shaping her into someone stronger and more capable. As she lay in bed, listening to the rain dripping slowly from the roof and the distant sounds of the animals settling in for the night, Clara felt a sense of peace. She had faced the hardest test yet, had worked tirelessly alongside Jeb, and had proven to herself that she could endure. She realized that the ranch, the work, and the man who had questioned her strength were all part of a journey that was shaping her into a resilient, capable woman. Outside, the wind whispered through the tall grass, carrying the scent of wet earth, hay, and distant flowers. The ranch was quiet but full of life, a place of both challenge and opportunity. Clara's journey was far from over, but she knew she had the strength, courage, and determination to face whatever lay ahead. She closed her eyes, ready for sleep, confident that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities to prove her endurance. Clara had learned that endurance was not about size, strength, or speed. It was about persistence, courage, and the ability to face hardship with determination. The storm had tested her in ways she had never imagined, but she had risen to the occasion. She had proven to herself, and perhaps to Jeb, that she could endure, adapt, and thrive in this new life. The morning after the storm, the ranch was quiet and calm. The sun rose slowly, casting a warm golden light across the wet fields. Clara woke feeling tired but proud. The storm had tested her endurance like nothing before, and she had survived. Her muscles ached slightly, but the ache was accompanied by a deep sense of accomplishment. She had faced challenges she had never imagined, and had proven to herself that she could endure, adapt, and grow stronger with each passing day. She dressed carefully, choosing a simple, practical dress and sturdy boots, and tied her hair back neatly. Breakfast was quiet as usual, with Jeb at the table, sipping his coffee and watching her with an unreadable expression. Clara had learned to read small signs in his eyes, subtle hints of approval, and today she felt certain that he recognized her growth. He spoke little, only saying, "The morning is yours to prepare. The animals need tending." Clara nodded and moved quickly, feeling capable and confident for the first time. Her small hands worked efficiently, feeding the chickens and collecting eggs, guiding the cows back into their pens, and checking the fences she had helped repair. She had learned to move with purpose, each task carried out carefully but with a growing sense of ease. Jeb observed from a distance, occasionally offering guidance but allowing her independence. Clara realized that endurance was no longer only about physical strength. It was about learning, observing, and acting with confidence. The ranch was no longer intimidating. It was a place where she could contribute, grow, and be recognized for her effort. As the morning passed, Jeb called her to help with the horses. A new task awaited, grooming them thoroughly and preparing them for the upcoming work in the fields. Clara approached the horses with care, brushing their coats and checking their hooves. The animals responded to her gentle touch and steady movements, nuzzling her in appreciation. She smiled, realizing that caring for the animals was also part of endurance. It required patience, attention, and a gentle strength that was just as important as physical labor. Jeb watched quietly, occasionally giving her tips, but his eyes held a newfound respect. By midday, Clara had completed most of the morning chores. Jeb suggested she rest while he tended to some repairs outside. She sat on the porch, sipping cool water and enjoying a rare moment of quiet. The sun was warm on her skin, and the air smelled of wet earth, hay, and the faint sweetness of flowers from the nearby fields. Clara reflected on her journey over the past few days. She had arrived small, nervous, and uncertain. She had faced long hours of hard work, learned new skills, and endured a storm that tested every ounce of her strength. Now she felt a quiet confidence that she had never known before. Jeb approached with a small, thoughtful expression. "You've done well," he said, his voice steady but carrying a weight of sincerity. Clara felt her heart swell with pride. It was the first time he had spoken to her without instructions or correction, a true acknowledgement of her efforts. She nodded, her voice catching slightly. "Thank you, sir," she said, her words small but heartfelt. Jeb's eyes softened and he offered her a brief smile. It was a simple gesture, yet it meant more to Clara than she could describe. She realized that endurance was not only about surviving hardships, but also about earning respect, trust, and recognition. The afternoon brought new tasks, but Clara approached them with a sense of calm and confidence. She helped repair the barn roof, carried water to distant pens, and organized supplies with careful precision. Each task was completed with care, showing Jeb that she was no longer fragile or inexperienced. She had become an active part of the ranch, capable and reliable. Jeb's occasional nods and quiet words of instruction reinforced her confidence, and she began to feel a deeper connection to him, not just as a stern figure of authority, but as someone who respected her effort and determination. As the day progressed, Clara noticed small changes in Jeb's behavior. He began to include her in decisions, asking for her opinion on how to organize the feed or which animals needed attention first. He no longer assumed she would fail. Instead, he treated her as a capable partner. Clara felt a warmth in her chest, a sense of belonging she had never felt before. She realized that endurance was not just about physical strength, but about patience, learning, and proving one's worth through consistent effort. She had endured the hardest days, faced her fears, and emerged stronger, gaining trust and respect in the process. By evening, the chores were completed, and the ranch was calm. Clara and Jeb stood together on the porch, looking out over the fields, the barns, and the animals they had cared for. The sunset painted the sky in shades of pink, orange, and gold, casting long shadows across the land. Clara felt a sense of peace she had never known before. She had faced the storm, endured the challenges of ranch life, and grown stronger and more confident with each passing day. The ranch, once overwhelming and intimidating, now felt like a place where she belonged. Jeb handed her a mug of warm water, his eyes meeting hers with a quiet, steady gaze. "You've proven yourself," he said simply. Clara felt a rush of pride and relief. She realized that endurance was not just about physical strength but about consistency, courage, and proving oneself through action. She nodded, unable to speak immediately, her throat tight with emotion. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but sincere. Jeb's expression softened further, a rare, genuine smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. That night, as Clara prepared for bed, she reflected on her journey. She had arrived at the ranch as a small, nervous girl, unsure if she could endure the challenges ahead. She had faced hard labor, learned new skills, endured a fierce storm, and proven herself capable and resilient. She realized that endurance was not about avoiding hardship. It was about facing it head-on, learning from each challenge and growing stronger with every experience. She felt a quiet pride in herself, a sense of achievement that warmed her heart. Jeb knocked on the door softly. "Rest well. Tomorrow will bring new work," he said. Clara nodded, smiling. She felt a deep sense of connection to him now, a quiet understanding that respect and trust had grown between them. She realized that their relationship had shifted, from one of uncertainty and fear to one of partnership and mutual respect. She had endured, proven herself, and begun to build a bond with the man who had once questioned her strength. As she lay in bed, listening to the soft sounds of the night, the wind rustling through the tall grass, the distant calls of animals settling in for the night, Clara felt a deep sense of contentment. She had faced the challenges of the ranch and proven her endurance, and she knew that she could meet any future obstacles with courage and determination. She closed her eyes, feeling both exhausted and triumphant, knowing that she had grown stronger in every way. The next morning, the ranch welcomed her with a calm and gentle light. Clara rose with renewed energy, ready to continue her work, ready to face new tasks, and ready to strengthen the bond she had begun to build with Jeb. She understood now that endurance was not only about surviving hard days, it was about proving oneself, building trust, and growing into the person she wanted to be. She felt a quiet confidence that she had never known before. Over the following weeks, Clara continued to thrive. She worked tirelessly, learning new skills, helping with the animals, repairing fences, and maintaining the ranch. Jeb's respect and trust grew alongside her capabilities. He began to rely on her judgment and sought her input in managing the ranch. Their interactions became warmer, more collaborative, and occasionally filled with quiet, unspoken understanding. Clara realized that endurance had transformed her not just physically, but emotionally and socially as well. One evening, as they stood together on the porch after a long day, Jeb placed a steady hand on her shoulder. "You have endured, adapted, and grown stronger than I expected," he said, his voice soft. Clara looked up at him, a smile tugging at her lips. "I wanted to prove I could," she said quietly, her eyes shining. Jeb nodded, a rare warmth in his gaze. "And you have. You are no longer the little one I questioned. You are strong, capable, and part of this life." Clara felt a surge of pride and happiness. She realized that endurance had not only earned her respect but also forged a deeper connection with Jeb. As the stars emerged in the night sky, Clara felt a profound sense of peace. She had arrived at the ranch uncertain, small, and fragile. Through hard work, courage, and determination, she had endured every challenge, gained trust and respect, and begun to form a meaningful bond with Jeb. She understood now that endurance was about strength, growth, and the quiet triumphs that shape a person's character. Clara lay down that night feeling stronger, more confident, and more connected to the life she had chosen. She had endured, proven herself, and discovered the power of persistence and courage. The ranch, once daunting and overwhelming, had become a place of opportunity, growth, and connection. And in the quiet of the night, she realized that she had truly earned her place here, not just as Jeb's mail-order bride, but as a strong, capable partner in life and work.